Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "You have learned how it was said, 'Eye for eye and tooth for tooth.' But I say this to you, offer the wicked man no resistance. On the contrary, if anyone hits you on the right cheek, offer him the other as well. If a man takes you to law and would have your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone orders you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles with him. Give to anyone who asks, and if anyone wants to borrow, do not turn away. You have learned how it was said, 'You must love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say this to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. In this way, you will be sons of your Father in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on bad men as well as good, and his rain to fall on honest and dishonest men alike. For if you love those who love you, what right have you to claim any credit? Even the tax collectors do as much, do they not? And if you save your greetings for your brothers, are you doing anything exceptional? Even the pagans do as much, do they not? You must therefore be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I believe many of you who frequent Novena Church would know Brother Bernard Heaney. He is a Redemptorist brother from the UK who have lived here in Singapore for many years, but unfortunately, about 3 years ago, he passed away. I had the pleasure of knowing Brother Bernard, especially during the years when I was a seminarian living here. And I've always found Brother Bernard to be a very pleasant person, and in many ways, he had taught me many wonderful life lessons. I remember there was once when we were sitting in the dining area chatting and having tea and just talking, when another person came into the dining area and joined us in the conversation. And when we started chatting, this person started to be very playful, and in a playful manner, he's tried to agitate Brother Bernard by saying things about him. And he was using a lot of very provocative words to try and have a reaction from Brother Bernard, basically trying to make him lose his cool. But Brother Bernard kept his cool throughout the whole conversation. And when that person left, I just paused for a while and I asked Brother Bernard this question. I say, "Brother, don't you think that this person have, in some ways, have crossed the line during the conversation just now? In a way, to me, I feel that this person has become very rude and very disrespectful in whatever that he said. So, brother, how come you can keep your cool and still be so calm, even when he was saying all these rather nasty things?" Brother Bernard looked at me and he smiled for a while, and then he replied, "If there is one rude person who with a very bad manner at the table, I do not need to add or become the other person or the other rude person at the table." At that moment, I've actually learned yet another very good life lesson from Brother. In the past weeks, the Sunday Gospel has been on the Sermon of the Mount. The Sermon of the Mount is a very famous sermon by Jesus that is recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. In it, we see Jesus going up a mountain, and he gave this very beautiful sermon, basically teaching us the ways of Christian living, quote unquote. And 3 weeks ago, we started reading this on the Sunday sermon. And of course, every time when we start the Sermon of the Mount, Jesus started it with the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the humble of heart, blessed are the meek, etc., etc. I'm very sure many of us are quite familiar with the Beatitudes. But that is not all of the Sermon of the Mount. And the following week, we see Jesus telling us to be salt of the earth and light of the world. And then last week, we continue his teaching by asking us to reflect on the meaning or the spirit behind the law. As followers of Christ, we don't just follow rules, but we must always understand what all these rules are meant for. It should always lead us to a deeper relationship with God and with other people. And this week, we continue Jesus' teaching on the Sermon of the Mount, and he focused very much, in a way, in the essence of holiness. This is a time where Jesus is asking us, with all the internal values that we have, it is a time for us to put it into our action with an external expression. And therefore, in the Gospel, Jesus tells us, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. In this way, you will be sons of the Father. Now, this is a teaching definitely that is not easy. It is easier said than done for each and every one of us. And yet, this is the challenge of Jesus for each and every one. So therefore, based on the readings today, I would like to just bring out a few points for us to reflect a little bit deeper of, are we in the road of holiness and living out the teaching of loving our enemies? Now, firstly, in order for us to do that, we must understand our nature. What does that mean? Well, firstly, if you understand Chinese, you probably have learned a little bit of this very beautiful philosophy by a Chinese philosopher that says, at the origin of human being, we are all good. 人之初，性本善. But for many of us, even the Chinese speakers, we might not realize is that there is another philosopher, Chinese philosopher, that says the opposite, that says that at the origin of human being, we were all evil. 人之初，性本恶. So now perhaps I would like you to reflect and maybe just ask yourself, which of this would you choose? Which of this do you believe? Are we all good in our origin or bad in our origin? Now, no matter which side you take, today I'm here to tell you that as a Christian, there is a definite side that we must believe. And that is, as a Christian, our origin is always good. As is stated in the first reading of the book of Leviticus, be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. This is a reminder that we are holy and good, not because of our own doing, but because we are made in the image and likeness of God. Because we have the image of God in us, we are all good. And that is something that we must believe at the core of our faith. But perhaps some of you might want to rebut. You will say that if that is so, why is it that there is so much evil in the world? Why is it that it's so much easier for me to choose to do something that is wrong than to choose something that is right? Now, we are all good in our core and origin, but our gospel, our history of salvation also reminds us that many times we as human beings, we are weak. And a lot of times, because of our weakness, we chose to go the other way, to move away from God. But as Christians today, we must always remember that we are good at our core. And more importantly, at this moment and this time and this society in this world, we must be witness to this reality to the world. And upon knowing this, we then reflect on the second point, that we are called to act. Our values have to become part of our lives, and we are called to live out the Beatitudes. And today especially, we are challenged to love, especially loving our enemies. Now, this is something that is definitely easier said than done. Let's do a little exercise. Just think of someone that annoys you right now, someone who might, because of his action, of his words, make you feel hurt, or someone that you are still having a little rift with. Now, today's gospel, Jesus is saying that love these people. Are you able at this very moment to forget all this tension between you and this person and just go out and embrace the person? For many of us, we will reflect and say, no, I can love everyone else, but just not this people, this person. But today, Jesus' challenge is that exactly this. You have to go and love this person that you have big trouble with. Now, of course, it is not easy, but Jesus tells us that it is possible. I would just like to give you an example, a real-life example of some of the experience that I have. I used to go to this hawker center with a group of colleagues, where we have this cleaner who is always in a bad mood. When he comes and cleans the stuff, he will always either say something that is very nasty, or he will shout at us. And a lot of time we get either very afraid, or we get very annoyed or agitated by it. But one day, one of the person that was with us said that, no, from today onwards, no matter what, when this person appears, I am going to flash a big smile at this lady, and I'm going to greet her. I'm going to ask her how she is. So she made this her mission. Every time when we go to this hawker center, she will especially look out for this person, and she will smile at her, and she will just greet her beautifully. And true enough, after a while, this lady started to change her attitude every time when she meets us. She started to smile, and she started to greet us, and she started to show her very beautiful side to us. And this is a reflection that sometimes we can make choices to go out and love someone in a difficult situation. Like the story of Brother Bernard that I've shared with you, he did not allow others to dictate his action and his reaction. He chose to become, although other people were provoking him. And this is, in a way, some part of the challenge that Jesus is giving us. We need to choose to love other people, even though at times these people do not deserve our love. They do not deserve our smile. They do not deserve our time. But we can make the choice to love them. And if we are able to do that, then we truly understand the essence of holiness that Jesus is challenging us today, to go out and to love our enemies. Finally, we need to remember that this road towards holiness, it is a journey. It's not just an event that happens and that's it. No one, I can say, will listen to a sermon today of the teachings and suddenly change their life immediately and tomorrow become the absolutely loving and just forgive all their enemies. A lot of time we reflect, we try, but then we fail, we fall, but we stand up again and we try again. As a second reading, St. Paul said to the Corinthians, if any one of you thinks of himself as wise in the ordinary sense of word, that he must learn to be a fool before he really can be wise. What is St. Paul saying? What is trying to say? He said that we must be a fool. Why? Because the wisdom of the world is foolishness to God. If you ever think that you are so wise that you don't need to learn anymore, you don't need to grow, you don't need to improve tomorrow, then you are the true fool in the eyes of God. We must always have the attitude of humility. We must have a humble heart to admit that there is room for me to grow. So as a summary, 3 important points towards holiness. Firstly, to remember our true nature, that our nature is from God and therefore we are made to grow towards holiness. And second, there is no other way than to put into action by beginning to love, especially to love those we find hard to love our enemies. And finally, to always remind ourselves, this road to holiness is a journey. We have to keep growing day by day towards holiness. Now, we are in a very trying times. It is difficult for us, but in this moment especially, we are called even more to be witnessed in our society and in our world. May we go out then to show and to lead people on the road towards holiness.